We're in the Daas Tevunos. We're on page 56 in the Rav Friedlander print, and we're in paragraph 72, Ayin Beis, if you're following the paragraph system in English. And we're in the discussion where the Seichel, several pages ago, the Neshama said to the Seichel, I have all now your introductions, Hatova, Yichud, God's not a Muchav, all the many things we talked about. Can we talk now about man? What's man doing here? And the Ramchal, through the Seichel, says, well, that is going to be a conversation that's going to require 3 discussions. One about creation, existence of man, one about man's deeds during his lifetime, and one about the fruits of his deeds, the fruits of his labor. The next step, breaking that down, the Ramchal says we're going to go to the last step first. Let's talk about the Tachlis. The Tachlis is Tchias HaMesim. We mentioned yesterday that we would learn the Derech Hashem about what Gan Eden is, the parking place for the Neshamas before Olam Haba. Today is Tu B'Av. I want to leave a little more time today to learn the Gemara about Tu B'Av. But Lineda, tomorrow, I will send out the handout for Derech Hashem to take a look at this concept of Gan Eden. But the Ramchal says, let's go to the Tachlis. And then we can work backwards and figure out how you get to the Tachlis. First, you need to understand what the goal is. When you understand what the goal is, then you can start figuring out how you want to get to the goal. We gave the marshal of the house. You can't just go to an electrician and plumber and say, I'm building a house. Can you come with some electrical supplies and some plumbing supplies, and go to a window person and say, can you just bring some windows? They're not going to do it. They're not going to do it. Let me make another note here. Excuse me. I'm adding now Leibowitz, and I'm adding Cohen. Okay, everybody Zeiger bench. Okay. So you can't just go to the plumber, the electrician, the window maker, etc., and say, I'm building a house, can you bring your stuff? You have to have the ultimate plan in front of you. And with the ultimate plan in front of you, the diagram, you say, here's the diagram. This is what I'm looking to build. What supplies do I need to get this accomplished? So we're going to the end state. What does the house in Olam Haba look like? And if that's what it looks like, if that's what I'm trying to build, what do I need to build at? So we're looking at Tchias HaMesim. If we're looking at Tchias HaMesim, Ramchal said, we need to look at 3 phases itself. The original question had 3 questions. Man, man's existence, creation, existence. Man's lifetime, what he does, his deeds, what the fruits of those deeds. 3 questions. Now, we're going to look at question 3, which are the fruits of the labor, which is Tchias HaMesim. Fine. Now, Tchias HaMesim breaks it down into 3 parts. If you want to understand Tchias HaMesim, we need to understand, first, a human being is born with a guf and a neshama together. Then the guf goes to one place. After 120 years, neshama goes to another place. And then at Tchias HaMesim, they both come back together, the guf and the neshama. So those are 3 separate phrases we need to understand. Excuse me. Page 56 in the Rav Friedlander Nun Vav, paragraph 72. And we mentioned yesterday that the goal of Avodas Hashem is, and that's why the neshama went into the guf, is for the neshama to purify and lift up the guf. It's a tough job. The guf is dense and dark. The neshama is light, and the light wants to shine. And it wants to shine through the darkness. And it wants to shine through the density of the physical guf. But the guf gives it a good fight. The guf is off thinking about all the desires it wants, all the things it wants to do, which are not healthy for the neshama, and don't allow the light to shine through. So though if a person lives his life guf, then his life will become more dense and more dark. And the chances of the neshama lighting become worse and worse. The more the guf becomes under control of the neshama, the more the neshama can light through the guf. In other words, the guf gives up its density slowly. It gives up its darkness. The guf begins to become slowly transparent until the light can shine through. We talked yesterday about a tris. You keep on closing your tris, you end up in the darkness. That's the guf prancing around doing whatever it wants. Every time that happens and something it shouldn't do does, a little part of the life tris gets pulled down, and you put yourself into additional darkness, chas v'shalom, and the neshama can't light up your life. Every time a person learns Torah, does a mitzvah, he opens the tris a little more, and more light can shine through that guf. Until a person can be zeicha like Moshe Rabbeinu, kikaran arpanav. His light, his face had a shine to it. What's the shine? The shine is the pashut, the light of the neshama came through his flesh skin. His dense flesh, physical skin became transparent through his avodas Hashem, that the light of his neshama was able to shine through the flesh. And Klal Yisrael looked at him, and they got scared of what they saw, the pasuk says. And Moshe put a masveh, he put a sort of a handkerchief over his face. There's a whole process by which he revealed his face, covered up his face. Koren Arpanav, he had a shine to him, and that's the neshama shining through what was once a dense, dark body that has been converted into a transparent spiritual thing. And it can become like a malach, the Ramchal said. There's one problem to this system, and that's what we were up to. The neshama asked the seichel, the system that we're talking about and that you've taught me is God created a perfectly imperfect world so that all of creation can join in and perfect the world. Well, what we have right now is the guf is definitely perfectly imperfect. The neshama came into the guf to perfect the guf, and it did its job. Now what happened? The system is working. The perfectly imperfect body has become perfected. Terrific. That was the Ratzon Hashem. What does the neshama get for that? It gets a star, it gets a card. The star and the card are the entranceway into Olam Haba. Terrific. So we have two things. The guf has become perfected, and the neshama is going to get reward. Where in this system of perfection does the neshama fit in? The neshama, as the Ramchal explained, we read by Friedlander, footnote 121 on page 55. The neshama started out perfect. It came from right beneath the Kisei HaKavod. It came into the guf. Halavayit should succeed in doing what it needs to the guf. And what is it going to get? It's going to Olam Haba. We don't really know what Olam Haba is. But where did the neshama start before it went into the guf? It was right next to the Kisei HaKavod. I don't know what Olam Haba is, but being next to the Kisei HaKavod is a pretty good place. So the neshama is already next to the Kisei HaKavod. And now it's sent down into the guf. It perfected the guf. Yashikayach. The guf is now perfect. That's inside the system of perfecting a perfectly imperfect world. What did the neshama get out of this? Okay, it got a star, it can go to Olam Haba. But one second, it started out in a perfect state under the Kisei HaKavod. So it's going to go to Olam Haba, and even if you say that now it earned its way to Olam Haba, Beseda, but in the system of perfecting, what did the neshama do for itself? How did it perfect itself? So what we're going to learn is, as we mentioned at the end yesterday, that the neshama, by perfecting the guf, is perfecting itself. But how can you perfect something that's perfect? Because there's nothing that's absolutely perfect except God. So even the neshama that we have is in a state where it can become more perfect than it was when it first entered the guf. Meaning that if the neshama does its job, the guf ends up perfected, gavaldik, and now the neshama that started perfect is even going to be a higher level of perfection. So in the system of perfecting and perfecting, not only will the imperfect guf become perfected, but the neshama in that system is also part of that system and will also attain a higher level of perfection. When we learned Daas Tevunos and Beis Tefillah and other places, we gave the mashal, we used watts. You go to the store and you buy a 100-watt bulb, and if they still sell these things today, it's hard to get regular bulbs today. I was in a hardware store yesterday, I just wanted to get a simple 40-watt bulb. They're not pushing to get anymore. Yeah, it's even hard to get the bulbs that eventually the bulbs that were like circular. It's almost, you can't get those. Everybody wants LEDs today. So when you have a bulb, it's 80 watt. You can still go to 100 watt. You can go to more wattage. So the neshama starts off at a certain wattage. This is just a mashal for things as we're going to learn them. And yes, it starts off at 80 watts and it's perfectly bright. But as it perfects the guf, it itself is going to also increase its own light and its own wattage. So the system of perfection, well, everything's created to perfect and get higher, is true for the neshama too. So now we're on page 56. We mentioned about the Zohar HaKadosh calls a person whose neshama perfected his guf a Sarah. We explained that yesterday. V'nei kol, we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines from the top of page 56. V'nei kol pri tzidkasa. This is the fruit of all the righteousness, the righteous acts of the neshama. Ilui kvoid shamakam baruch hu. It raises up the covet of the Ratzon Hashem. Remember, we don't do. Ramchal quoted the pasuk. Yehi chavod Hashem la'olam yismach Hashem u'masav. May God's honor be forever, and He should be happy with His creation. We read the Rambam. We at the end of the first paragraph, we saw the Torah. God doesn't get happy, doesn't get sad. God's essence is unknown to us. We're always talking about Ratzon. Have I done something that fulfills God's will? The big question. This is the big question. People have a question. At the end of the day, I'm holding myself back actually right now. There's something I want to say, but it's too ba'av. I'm not going to say it today. People, at the end of the day, they say to themselves, how much did I learn today? 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Tomorrow I have to learn a little more. I learned 6 hours today, geschmack a day. How many mitzvahs did I do today? Did I daven b'kavanah today? And they have all these kinds of cheshbonis, and they're very important cheshbonis. How many people ask themselves at the end of the day, was today a successful day in the sense that my neshama took hold of my guf and it actually controlled my guf in a way that it had never done before, so that my guf is now more pure than my neshama. After all, that's the reason why God sent my neshama into my guf. That's the tachlis. So people can ask different questions. The tachlis question, and that's what the Ramchal said. It's a tachlis. Paragraph 72, paragraph 70, 70, 72. The whole tachlis of the neshama coming into the guf is for it to purify the guf. How do you purify a dense, dark, physical guf? The Baruch Shalom gave us these beautiful tools, Torah and mitzvahs. They are tools to do the avodas Hashem. What is avodas Hashem, Rabbi Isa? What does it mean to serve Hashem? I served Hashem today. I put on my tefillin. I served Hashem today. I put on my tzitzis. Is that the meaning of avodas Hashem? I know this is going to be startling to people, but is that the meaning of avodas Hashem? When a person says, I put on my tefillin, I put on my tzitzis today, it means he used the tools of mitzvahs to perfect himself, which is the Ratzon Hashem. The Ratzon Hashem is that the neshama take hold of the dense, dark guf and lift up that dense, dark guf and perfect it. Did I do something that perfected my guf today? Did my neshama do something to perfect my guf? So I may have learned Torah, and Torah may have done that. But Torah is the tool by which I did the tachlis. A mitzvah is the tool by which I did the tachlis. It itself is not the tachlis. And this is nebuch, such a terrible mistake. And I don't want to talk about it on Tu B'Av, but this is just a terrible mistake. People, and I mentioned this yesterday, people take the ikr and make it a tafel, and take the tafel and make it an ikr. Ad kidei kach, and I won't mention the name, but and the person is not living anymore. It was a tremendous going of the previous generation. He wrote, and this is something that actually was brought to my attention by Dr. DePose, my friend Dr. DePose. And we've discussed this many times. Very hurtful when we talk about it, it's very hurtful for us to talk about it. He said, and it was transcribed, that without getting into the direct quote, as much as it will be exciting for him to see the Beis HaMikdash and to bring the Korban Pesach in the Beis HaMikdash, he feels it's more exciting on a certain level to be able today, without the Beis HaMikdash, to learn about the Korban Pesach, to learn the Rashi, the Gemara, the Tosfos, the Ramban, the tremendous beauty of studying the Torah of Korban Pesach is in a certain way even more exciting than seeing the Beis HaMikdash and bringing that Korban Pesach. Wow. It's hard to say. There are a lot of things that are hard to repeat today that big people are saying. Somebody called me yesterday. We're going off subject here for a moment. Someone called me yesterday. The second person that called me. I get these calls. Somebody sent me a copy of an article, and he gave me a 2-sentence summary of the article. I decided not to open the article. I wasn't interested in reading it. It's an article about an interview with a certain Rosh Hashiva in America who's talking about young couples who have been asking him, should they leave America now and make Aliyah? It's getting dangerous in America. And the summary that was given to me in the email was just, this is not something I want to read. This is just Agmas Nefesh. This is something I would want to read on Tisha B'Av when I want to cry some more. Otherwise, I don't want to read this article. Somebody called me yesterday and said, did you see this article? It says this. And I said, I got a summary. I have not had the courage to open it up and read it. No. And this person said to me, I'm going to write this person that calls, I'm writing a response to this. I don't understand how a Rosh Hashiva can say such things to young people about Eretz Yisrael. I said, all right, take it easy. Think about it. He said, are you going to say something? I said, I don't know. Take it easy. I haven't even read the article yet. I still haven't built up the courage to read the article. And I'm not going to read it today, Blined. It's Yontif. I'm not going to make myself Agmas Nefesh. People get the Iker and the Tafel mixed up. You get it mixed up. And can call it the Gemara in Tainus and Daf Zayin. You want to go to Kabbalah, the Sefer Kabbalah. They talk about Torah can become a klipa. We talk about the word klipa as a shell. A klipa is not a good thing. We talk about in Kabbalah klipas. It's a shell. The guf is a klipa. The guf is a shell because inside the shell there's a holy neshama that wants to shine through that shell. The guf is a type of klipa to the neshama. And we talk about all kinds of klipas in the world, and we have to get rid of the klipos. If we get rid of the klipos, the shechina can shine through klipa shells. Learning Torah can be a klipa. It says this mafurish. People can learn Torah, and the Torah, instead of helping them shine their neshama through their guf, the Torah actually forms a more dense covering over the neshama and makes it harder for the neshama to shine through the guf. Imagine that. The Torah, the Gemara in Tainus Hadav Zayin even says that someone learns Torah Shaloi Lishma, whatever the definition is. The Gemara says Nasas like Sam Hamavas. It's like poison. If you don't learn Torah Lishma, again, Lishma, people think Lishma means like there are different ways to interpret Lishma. Lishma, like Reb Meir in the six-pack of Pirkei Avos, is the highest level. Whatever the definition is, take a look at the Rashi there, and Tainus Daf Vav and Tainus Daf Zayin and other places, the definitions of Lishma, of Rashi and Tosfos. But the Gemara says, if a person learns Torah Shaloi Lishma, the Torah becomes poison. Now, I know they're going to be kashas. The Gemara says that a person should learn Torah Shaloi Lishma, Shemi Torah Shaloi Lishma, Bo Lishma, Allah good to kashas. All the kashas have to roots him. But the Gemara makes an express, blatant statement on Tainus Daf Zayin. If you learn Torah Shaloi Lishma, Torah becomes a poison for you. It can kill you like a poison can kill you. Torah Shaloi Lishma. What? So it's Shaloi Lishma. It's not the finest Torah, but it's poison. Yeah, it's poison. It can become poison. You have to understand what the ikka is and what the tafel is. The ikka here is, and people refuse to talk about this. People keep on talking about learning, making another seder, making another daf yomi, and making another gemach, and collecting more tzedakah, and buying better mezuzahs, and getting its fill-in check more often, and all good demises, but nobody wants to talk about two words, Ratzon Hashem. Ratzon Hashem? What is the Ratzon Hashem here? How many times do we ask that a day to ourselves? I'm about to make a decision. What's the Ratzon Hashem? That is the Avodas Hashem of a human being. As he goes through life, what is the Ratzon Hashem? What's God's will here? I know nothing about God himself, but God revealed a will. And I want to fulfill his will. How do I fulfill his will? You fulfill his will in the broad stroke by getting your neshama to control your guf and converting that dense physical guf into a spiritual living thing, almost like a malach. That's your goal. That's what you're here for. But it's such a hard job. You're right. That's why Rebbeinu Shalom gave you Torah and mitzvahs as tools to help you do the job. But that's not the job. The job is to take the guf and perfect the perfectly imperfect guf. That's the Ratzon Hashem. And you got the tools, go off and do it. Okay. So a guf that has perfected its neshama, perfected the soul, we call that a sorah. V'nei kol, page 56, v'nei kol pritzit kasa ilu k'vodah shel mokem baruch hu. That's the whole tachlis of everything, is to bring out kavod Hashem. How do you bring out glorifying and honoring God? By fulfilling his will. You fulfill his will, that's kavod Hashem. Hamas'ala b'shleimus b'yosef. God is elevated. Again, you can't elevate or bring God down. You can't do it. But there's an elevation to the Ratzon Hashem when the world and the creation gets perfected. God created everything to bring about this kavod. What's the kavod? I'm not God, but God created a perfectly imperfect world. Come join me, perfect it. And when it becomes a perfect world, which is my Ratzon, it's a tremendous kavod for me to look at a perfect world. This is the only thing, the real only thing that occurs from your Torah and mitzvahs as far as the Rebbeinu Shalom is concerned. Again, that's all that occurs, the ramifications of all your good deeds as far as heaven is concerned, and what I just explained. Asher al and for that, the Rebbeinu Shalom designated a reward. To the extent that a human being brings quote-unquote nachas ruach to God, and again, you can't bring nachas ruach directly to God. you're fulfilling the Ratzon of Hashem, Kenya Osalo. And God will repay that person back, that person should also have Nachas Ruach. We're going to read just an introductory line here where this plan went off the cliff. Rav Friedlander's caption, Mishum Chet Odom Harishon, Hanasham Yechol Lazakek Es Haguf, Rak Achrei Sheshov L'Ofroi, V'Yenuka Mizu Hamosoi, V'Yokom L'Tchiyah. After the Chet of, and this is a summary, it's a caption for what Ramchal is going to say in the next few days. It's Rav Friedlander's summary. Before the Chet of Adam Harishon, had Adam Harishon withstood that test of the Nachash, he would have perfected his perfectly imperfect being, and the world would have come to a state of shleimus. And what would have happened after that? Would people have been born? If people have been born, how long? What would the world look like? I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. But it would have been a world of shleimus. But because Adam Harishon ate from the Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra, he brought a disease into his body. It's spiritual and it's a physical disease. It has caused Adam Harishon and all his descendants the situation where it is impossible, underline, impossible for a human being in this lifetime for the neshama to completely purify the guf. Because into the guf went Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra. It's in there. And mankind can't get rid of it, and will never get rid of it until Tchias HaMesim. Never get rid of it, notwithstanding what other religions may say. You can't get rid of it. It's in the human being. It's a part of your genes. There's Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra inside every human being. What does that mean? Different discussion. But there's Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra in every human being. Now, the body is going to go to the ground after 120 years and decompose. The purpose of that decomposition is for the body to release the zuhama, the infection, the bacteria of the Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra, releases it. A new body can then be formed at Tchias HaMesim. In that new body, the neshama can go in, and that's a neshama that is no longer fighting a dense physical body that's dense and physical and dark from the Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra still in it. So let's read Rav Friedlander's summary. This is a complex discussion. Let's just read his summary. Mishum Chet Adam Harishon, because of the sin of Adam Harishon, Hanasham Yechol L'Zakek Es Haguf, the neshama can purify the body. Rak Acharei Sheshov L'Afro, only after it goes back to dust. V'Yenuka Misu Hamosai, and it becomes cleansed from the bacteria and the infection of Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra. It releases it into the ground. V'Yokom L'Tchiyah, and then that body that person can then be Zeichel Tchias HaMesim in this purer body in which neshama can go back in. And B'lei Nedem Yetz Hashem will continue this. I have to remember to send out the Derech Hashem so we can take a look very briefly at Gan Eden.